Bluffing has always been poker's most misunderstood weapon. Some players think it's reckless, others think it's magic, but the truth is more complicated. Bluffing isn't just about the one making the move, it's also about the one deciding whether to believe it. In this video, we're going to examine both sides of the bluffing coin, the bluffer, who's trying to tell a story and push an opponent off a hand, and the bluffee, who's weighing whether that story holds up or whether it's time to pick it off. We'll break it down through two lenses: the math when bluffing is actually profitable long-term, the psychology, why players bluff in the first place, why others call, and how ego, image, and patience all shape those decisions. By the end, you'll see that bluffing isn't about bravado or luck. It's about timing, context, and understanding both the storyteller and the listener. This is Terry Wood from PokerRailbird.com, and today we're answering the question, is bluffing really profitable in the long run? Let's start with the psychology. Why do players bluff in poker at all? At its core, bluffing is goal-seeking. You want to win the pot now without having to show down a weak hand. That's the purest form of bluffing, and when done with the right math and story, it's completely legitimate. But beneath the surface, many players bluff for the wrong reasons. Ego creeps in. Some bluff just to prove they can move you off the hand. Then they show you their busted straight draw, or 7-deuce. That's not strategy, that's identity and pride taking over. The contrast is this. A disciplined player bluffs only to win the pot. Others bluff out of boredom. Poker is a waiting game, and action bias sets in. Late in a session, when the cards go cold, some players manufacture excitement with risky and ill-timed bluffs. There's also what I call the loss aversion flip. After losing a big pot, some players bluff more, desperately trying to reclaim status. Others bluff less, afraid to dig a deeper hole. And finally, self-justification. You'll see this when a player double-barrels the flop and turn, and then feels compelled to fire the river. It's not about telling a credible story anymore. It's about avoiding the feeling that they misplayed earlier streets. Here's a simple tool to avoid falling into these traps, the pre-bluff pause. Before you fire, ask yourself, am I telling a believable story? Or am I just scratching an itch? That 1 second of mindfulness can save you hundreds of dollars over the long run. Since I just mentioned it, let's talk about why players show bluffs. Some say they do it as advertising. They think if they show one bluff, they'll get paid off later when they have a real hand. But in reality, more often than not, showing a bluff is pure ego. It's saying, look at me. Look what I got away with. The problem is, it rarely works the way they think. Smart players will tag you as reckless, and weaker players will just decide to call you more often. Either way, you're making your life harder. That's why my rule is simple. I never show a bluff. Sometimes I'll show a monster to reinforce my image, but never weakness. The less free information you give away, the better. Of course, every bluff needs a target. And the psychology of the caller is just as important as the psychology of the bluffer. Some players are willing to pay what I call the curiosity tax. They just have to see it. This spikes especially against talkers, or if they've been needled during the hand, and often they are actually making the correct call, but for the wrong reasons. Then there's the ownership effect. They've already invested chips, so folding feels like losing twice. It's the classic sunk cost fallacy. Others fall into entitlement tilt. They think they're due for a pot, and suddenly their calling range widens way too much. And then you have suspicion bias. Some players are wired to default to disbelief. They think everyone is bluffing them. Others default the opposite way and fold too often. That's why profiling your opponents is critical. Here's the tool. Tag your opponents by their default response to big river bets. Are they a folder, a caller, or balanced? Bluff only the folders. One more wrinkle. Sometimes a bluff gets called simply because your opponent is the better player, or because your image has been reckless. For example, if you've been betting every hand and now fire big into a tight player on a scary board, don't be surprised when they sniff it out. This is why bluffing isn't just about the math, it's also about table image and opponent skill. Now let's shift gears from psychology to math, because at the end of the day, bluffing in poker still comes down to numbers. The only formula you really need is simple. Required fold percent equals bet divided by pot plus bet. Here's what that looks like in practice. If you bet 1/3 pot, you need about 25% folds. Half pot? About 33%. 2/3 pot? About 40%. A pot-sized bet needs 50%. Translation: if your opponent won't fold at least that often, your bluff is lighting money on fire. Let's put numbers to it. Say the pot is $120 and you bluff $60. You're risking $60 to win $120. That means you need your opponent to fold 33% of the time just to break even. If they fold more than that, the bluff is profitable. If they fold less, it's a long-term loser. That's why knowing your opponent matters more than the formula itself. Against a calling station, even the cleanest math won't save you. Against a folder, the numbers work beautifully. And remember, semi-bluffs are your safest bluffs. When you've got outs to improve if you're called, like a flush or straight draw, you're not just relying on fold equity. You've got real equity too. Now let's get practical. The profitability of bluffing in poker depends heavily on the player pool you're sitting in. In Call Happy Live games, your typical 1-3 or 2-5, pure river bluffs are usually negative EV. These players love to see showdowns. The real profit engine isn't bluffing, it's betting thinner for value because they'll pay you off. Against disciplined players, bluffs can work, but only in the right spots. They'll fold missed hands on early streets, so semi-bluffing flops and turns can succeed. But if they make it to the river, expect resistance. Late street bluffs against strong regs are high risk, low reward. Fold equity collapses as the number of opponents increases. Someone usually has enough equity to call, which makes bluffing into 3+ players almost always a losing play. Deeper stacks create leverage. The threat of losing 200 big blinds can make well-constructed bluffs credible. Shallow stacks do the opposite. Opponents feel priced in, reducing fold equity and killing bluff value. The same bluff that's brilliant in one game can be suicidal in another. Before you pull the trigger, ask, does this pull even fold often enough for bluffing to be part of the profit engine? Bluffing in poker isn't just about board texture or bet sizing. It's about who you're up against. Different player types respond to bluffs in very different ways, and if you ignore that, you're gambling, not strategizing. Let's break this down. Maniacs. Don't even think about bluffing them. They'll call you down with third pair or ace high just to prove a point. The best counter strategy is to tighten up and let them build the pot for you. Loose passive players. These players are the classic calling stations. They'll chase any draw and call far too often. Bluffing them is a losing battle, but you can occasionally steal a flop if the board is bone dry and they completely whiffed. The real money comes from value betting relentlessly when you're ahead. Tight passive players. Easier to bluff on the flop if the board texture favors you, but here's the danger. If they call to see the turn, they usually have something real. And if they make it all the way to the river, bluffing them is nearly impossible. By that stage, they're only continuing with a strong hand. Tight aggressive players. This is where nuance matters. A semi-bluff on the flop or turn can work because you might actually improve if called. But pure river bluffs? Risky. By the time they've invested that far, their range is usually strong. Still, tags are also capable of laying down hands when the story is consistent, so timing is everything. Loose aggressive players, similar to maniacs, but with more thought behind the aggression. They fire frequently and put you in tough spots. The best way to bluff a loose aggressive is actually to let them do the betting and then use aggression selectively on later streets when the board heavily favors your range over theirs. The point is simple. Bluffing is never one size fits all. Your opponent type dictates whether the bluff is even on the menu. Now that we've covered psychology, math, and player types, let's put it all together into what I call the bluff dial, a quick situational checklist to decide whether a bluff even makes sense. 1. Opponent. Bluff only the folders. If someone's a calling station, your bluff dial should be turned all the way down to 0. 2. Story. Would you value bet the same way? If the answer is no, your story doesn't add up, abort the bluff. 3. Blockers. You want to block the hands they call with, not the hands they fold. Having the ace of spades when a spade flush gets there is powerful. But if you're holding the very cards they'd have folded, you're killing your own fold equity. 4. Price. Use the fold equity formula. Required fold percent equals bet divided by pot plus bet. Example, if the pot is $120 and you bluff $60, you need your opponent to fold 33% of the time just to break even. Anything above that is profit. Anything less and you're bleeding money. 5. Street. Prefer flop and turn semi-bluffs. Keep your river bluffs rare. They require the cleanest story and the right opponent. 6. Headspace. Finally, check yourself. If missing one bluff will tilt you, size down or skip it entirely. Emotional control is part of the math too. Let's talk about tells. Tells are tricky because no single action guarantees someone is bluffing. They only matter in context. But over thousands of hands, certain patterns show up again and again. Here are some classic bluffing behaviors you should watch for, not as rules, but as clues to be correlated with the hand and the player. 1. Stillness and silence. Many bluffers go into a freeze response. The hands stop moving, the breathing changes, and suddenly they get very quiet. It's the deer in the headlights reaction, anxiety showing up in the body. 2. Avoiding or overdoing eye contact. Most bluffers look away, not wanting to engage. But some overcompensate, they stare too hard, trying to look strong. That's why you can't read tells in isolation. It's about consistency versus deviation. 3. Betting motions. Forceful, exaggerated chip throws are usually strength, not weakness. But a soft, careful placement often signals bluffing. Bluffers don't want to arouse interest. 4. Speech leaks. 2 common ones. Announcing bets out loud when unnecessary, often strength. Talking you out of calling, almost always weakness. You really want to call that, is often the last gasp of a failed bluff. 5. The little smile. That nervous half smile some players flash after bluffing often leaks insecurity. Tells aren't magic. They're hints. Combine them with board texture, betting patterns, and player tendencies. Tells must be correlated to the situation, and no one tell should be acted upon unless you have previously verified that tell with that particular player more than once. Generally, a player will display more than one tell, such as avoiding eye contact and being extremely silent and quiet. That's correlation, and that's where tells become powerful. And if you want to go deep, Zachary Elwood's books, Reading Poker Tells, Verbal Poker Tells, and Exploiting Tells are your best resources. We also have our Poker Railbird live stream interviews with Zachary. I have posted the links in the description below. So after all this, let's get to the real question. Is bluffing in poker profitable long term? The short answer, yes, selectively. When the opponent, the story, the blockers, and the price all line up, bluffing can be plus EV. But broadly? No. In most live low-stakes games, especially call-happy environments with lots of multi-way pots, pure bluffs are rarely profitable. Here's the reality. Over a year of play, value hands will drive 80 to 90% of your profit. Non-showdown wins from bluffs can add another 5 to 20%, but only if you stay disciplined and pick your spots wisely. That's why bluffing is best viewed as a supplement to your value game, not the core of it. You don't need to bluff often to be a long-term winner. What you need is the judgment to recognize the rare moments when the math, psychology, and table dynamics all line up for a successful bluff. So yes, bluffing can be profitable, but it's not the hero move from the movies. It's a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And it's not just about how you bluff, it's just as much about how you respond when you're the one facing the heat. The best players study both sides of the coin. They know when to apply pressure, and they know when to resist it. Bluffing isn't about being unexploitable, it's about being adaptable, right here, right now, against the players in front of you. If you'd like to go deeper, the full article, Is Bluffing Really Profitable, Long Term, is live now at pokerrailbird.com. I'll leave the link in the description below. And as always, if you feel this video added value to your game, hit like, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more strategy content. Thanks for watching. I'm Terry Wood from pokerrailbird.com, and I'll see you at the tables.